could get your attention real quick. Before we get started, I want to have our two language interpreters introduce themselves for everybody that needs those supports.
Buenas noches a todos, yo voy a ser intérprete para los de español. Si gustan unos aparatos, se encuentran aquí atrás y podemos empezar ahí. Gracias.
안녕하세요. 한국통역 최수입니다. 혹시 이 회의 내용을 한국어로 통역을 원하시면 뒤쪽으로 오시기 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
So thank you very much. Just about 5 minutes before we get started.
Yeah, okay, all right.
It's actually
So, throw some of them.
So if you hold here, just speak loud. You gotta bring it up.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started here. We are now going to start the fourth of our middle school advisory committee meetings. As we heard earlier, we do have Spanish and Korean translation services available. If you would like to take advantage of that, please go see our translators and they will set you up. I also want to announce that behind me we have a camera that is televising, or live streaming rather, our meetings, and you may view those meetings, or that live stream tape on the district's webpage, on the district's Facebook and Twitter feeds. So anybody may view those meetings at now or at a later date if you choose. So the advisory committee meetings are all public meetings, and all materials will be available to the public through the posting of the materials on the district's webpage. We have provided our advisory committee 2 additional pieces of information today. We have a file called the demographic, what we're calling it, race and ethnicity, the pre-reduced lunch data, and that's posted on our webpage this afternoon. And we have a trails map, the 2016 trail system map from THPRD, also posted on our webpage. My name is Stephen Sparks. I am the Administrator for Long Range Planning for the district, and I'll be facilitating these meetings throughout our process. Before we get started with our committee work this evening, I want to point out our meeting expectations. And these expectations have been placed on your agendas, and I want to make sure everyone understands that these expectations apply not only to the advisory committee, but everybody in the room. So, here we go. We assume the best of intentions. We all want the best for our students. We listen intently to understand better. We are open to considering new ideas. We remain open to influence and are not judgmental. We will consider all options. There are no bad questions. Our interactions will be done with respect, and we will respect opposing viewpoints. So, the demonstrations we had at the last meeting, we are not going to tolerate those at our meetings. If you cannot abide these expectations, we invite you to instead view the meeting on the live stream. You may yell at the TV all you want, but we're not going to do it here. Our committee members represent communities and viewpoints from across the district. They are not here solely to represent a school or their interests. The committee's questions, comments, suggestions, and ultimately their recommendation will be for the benefit of all students in the district. So tonight we're going to start the second phase of our iterative process. At the first 2 meetings, the prior 2 meetings, the public participated in the mapping workshop exercises, and you see these theme maps behind the committee. You've seen them online. The committee will use these maps to start their discussion and review of the maps. These 4 theme maps, they were created by staff. The advisory committee does not own them. The advisory committee will not vote on them. What these maps are summaries of the most commonly expressed ideas through the public mapping process. And these maps are graphic representations of that public testimony. So the committee, starting tonight, will begin developing its own boundary maps. And we will publish those materials as we go along so everybody can see that. Tonight, we're asking the advisory committee to focus their review on the first 2 board objectives from our board. those two objectives are creating an attendance boundary for Timberland and creating an attendance boundary for Stoller that will reduce the enrollment to approximately 90% of the school permanent capacity. So, with that, I am not going to walk our advisory committee through the maps. We've all seen them, we all understand them, I hope. What I will invite the advisory committee to do is, as we get going here, if you want to speak or have questions or whatever, I ask that you put your name tag up so I can recognize you, so we don't step all over one another. If I don't see tents up, I will call on people and make you talk. As we said, this is all going to be done with respect and courtesy. So, are there any questions from the committee before we get started? Okay. I just have received a notice that if you do not have a seat, if you are standing in the cafeteria space here, you will need to go into the gymnasium down the hall. The meeting is being live streamed down there, and you'll be able to hear what's going on. We have a fire code issue. We had the fire marshal come to us before this meeting, and we do not want the fire marshal to show up during the meeting and clear the room. So please, if you would, if you're standing, please go to the gymnasium next, down the hall. Okay, with that. Advisory Committee, do you have any questions or comments before we get started? John.
Hi, Stephen. Good afternoon. Thanks for putting together all of this information. It seems like a tremendous effort, and I appreciate that. I am curious if I understand these four maps were built off community input completely. Is it possible to also get a map that is purely data-driven? Like if there was just a computer model of inputs that we wanted, like free reduced lunch, number of students projected, that we just see sort of a pure map?
So we as staff can certainly prepare a map that would be as, how can I say this, as equitable as possible in terms of certain factors. What I caution us in doing is that won't be in respect to any feeder patterns necessarily. It won't be in respect to any transportation data and the like, because the district's poverty exists in certain areas, and if we were to say try to spread that equitably across all of the schools, we would have attendance boundaries that look like spokes in a wheel, and the transportation costs would be tremendous for that. However, if the committee would like us to proceed with that kind of analysis, we can certainly do that.
Thank you. The reason I'm asking is just from a point of view of what we might want to ask for that map to look like. Because maybe 300 is just one example. I just want to think about it from a terms of, I definitely want to listen to and reflect and respect the community input, but I also am fearful that we might miss some key inputs if we're just looking at input data and not looking at what a model might show us as options. And maybe it would be just pure growth projections, and another one could be free and reduced lunch equalization. But I just think there might be an opportunity for us to have a dialogue about what those inputs might look like.
Right. And our advice to you here this evening in looking at those two board objectives can help narrow that analysis to those other factors like free reduced lunch, transportation, the ethnic makeup of the district or the school. that makes it a lot easier for us and more efficient for us to then provide you with that data, where you may turn around and say, well, from a numbers perspective, an enrollment numbers perspective, yes, this works, but for these factors, it doesn't work. So let's just say transportation. You know, we can create a boundary for solar where it works, but the busing cost is going to be tremendous. And, you know, that's going to be a value choice that you as a committee are going to have to make. Jason?
Steve, on the subject of security bunch, I think I'm remembering right that during the high school process, the district had produced essentially a heat map. So it wasn't necessarily creating a boundary map options, but it was a graphical way to say, okay, you could overlay it on a regular map and see.
Jason?
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Just something that I believe at one point the district produced what I'll call a heat map around pre-introduced lunch that was an easy graphical way to see where these concentrations are, and that would be maybe a good way to represent the data without producing a map per se to try and optimize for.
Right. We have a heat map in my office right now, but we want to update it with current information, and I'm afraid you don't see Robert sitting next to me. You have David Williams, Administrator of Government Strategies. Robert has unfortunately been out of the office, and so not able to present that information to you here today. Charisse.
Just a quick question and really a follow-up to what John's talking about. And maybe this is item 3 on our agenda, but for me, having all of this data is wonderful, but without understanding outside of those first 2 pieces, the things that we're going to use as a committee to really make those determinations. Is it lunch? Is it ethnicity? Is it busing? To really understand where we're going, it's hard to look at all of this and have it make sense. So is that what we're doing in item 3 today? I guess that's my question.
Yes. So, as I said, today we're going to look at it one-dimensionally. It is solely, creating that boundary and that sustainable enrollment for Timberland and getting the enrollment numbers down at Stoller. That would meet the board objectives. We then start adding layers of data to that, where you then start making choices on those factors, such as the ethnicity, whether it's free reduced lunch or transportation, whatever it might be. And it might be different for each scenario that you're looking at. So looking at one attendance boundary, the split feeder program, the split feeders that exist right now are more important to address to that community and to the committee than, say, the transportation costs. Whereas in another part of the district, the transportation costs are far more important than something else.
Okay, so you want pure numbers today only?
Pure numbers, it's about, let's deal with the big rocks. We'll then start dealing with smaller rocks and the sand later. Christy.
Thanks, Stephen. I wanted to find out so all of our theme maps, the enrollment projections on these maps that we're going to be using to evaluate if these maps meet the first 2 objectives. Those first 2 objectives are for targeting enrollment when the boundaries are enacted in 2021. All of our maps are for enrollment projections for 2025. So it seems like the maps and the data we have is not really the same in what we should be evaluating.
Right. We chose 2025 on purpose because from our projections, you see that we're moving through a larger body of students right now, and it will have about 5 years of new boundaries in enrollment. We also don't know how to right now calculate if there are legacy students, what happens if option programs are moved, and the like. we can certainly provide to the committee the data based on each year as we move forward. The data that I do want to refer to in terms of the options, you'll see that we have, again, as you know, it's 2025, but we have an estimated attending options that are off-site. What we've done is we have taken the actual enrollment in the variety of options by grid code in existing attendance areas. We've taken a 3-year average and we have applied that to those areas. So it's, you know, it may not be exactly 22 students in 2025, but based on our assessment of what has historically happened at these grid code levels, this is what we expect based on the themes for the different middle schools.
So are these numbers on these grid codes now, do those reflect the adjustments for students attending off-site programs?
That is a question that I will have to answer as I am not exactly sure. I would have to consult with Robert before I can tell you definitely.
Jason. Just picking up on that point, I think it would be really valuable. Since we last met, we had some email exchanges, and I would be sent a great email that was really helpful in my mind to just crystallize, especially the two things we're looking at tonight. It was simple calculation on the 5 feeder schools in the solar, and then the application of the rough estimate of how many kids will be taken out because they're in non-resident option programs. And I think it would be really helpful when we produce maps like these to have, rather than the resident population, we have those estimates applied. And I would love to see, maybe on an ongoing basis, only for clarity, to evaluate one switch versus another, current day boundary with that information there, because that's where you can really crystallize and see, like, it's that 1745 number for solar. It's something that existed in previous processes. I think is very helpful because it's essentially the problem statement, if you will.
Okay, so for me to do my active listening here to be sure I've got what you're saying is, there was 2 things. First, I'm going to go backwards. First is have the number of students, the option students by existing boundary, and understand what the problem statement, as you said, is at each of the existing attendance areas.
Right, so it's essentially like you have on these, there's a definite, you're showing the map, which is great on how, you know, here's the resident population, here's how you're subtracting. Just rolling that up to these maps, and so rather than list the total resident population, let's list these calculated populations, and if you're really calculating it by grid code, let's throw those numbers on this grid code. You know, so we don't have to sort of do the math on our own to get to the numbers we're really working on.
Okay.
And understanding that in a number of ways, we're talking about estimates.
Okay, that's something we can do. And then the second one is to have it based on the maps that you are creating, in having that same kind of level of analysis.
Exactly right. So have one for the present boundary, and then each time we have a theme map or the equivalent, let's use that same set of numbers.
So I think for us, just to keep order of what we're dealing with, I'd like for us to call these theme maps, and then as the committee starts creating maps, we'll call them committee map 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. And that way, you know, we know who owns what and can go that route. Okay, Divya.
In the theme maps, I noticed that there is utilization of permanent capacity and portable capacity data provided. But one of the objectives clearly says to reach Stoller to approximately 90% of permanent capacity. Given that objective, does it make sense to include the portable capacity data on these maps, or should we just remove it and assume we are going to use the building capacity only?
Our recommendation is to provide you with all the classroom capacity data that we have. And it may come to pass, just thinking out loud here, that as you go along and looking at the schools and the attendance boundaries, it may be necessary for you to have a relief valve in portables if, for example, let's just say as an example here, we're at Stoller, and we are able to get down to a 90-ish% average here with some moves, but we don't understand what the legacy enrollment will be. Well, having, you know, the portables on the site may provide that relief for a period of time that could get us over the edge. But these are factors that you, through your discussions, are going to have to weigh. John?
One more point. I'm interested, since this are theme maps from the public, and I'm looking, if I understand what I'm looking at correctly, we have some themes between the maps also, and they came, the specific question I want to ask came from a lot of the dialogue that we had between Stoller and Springville and Findlay. And it looks like the options are essentially that we have Springville stays in Stoller or Springville moves to Five Oaks. And in the scenario where Springville moves to Five Oaks, Findlay becomes a split feeder, if I'm looking at both scenarios. What I'd be interested in that conversation, was an important conversation for us to work through, clearly because of the interest in the room. But I'm curious from a Findlay parent perspective or just the advisory council perspective on, does it make sense to not have an option that Findlay would move fully to the new middle school if the choice was to have some of them move? Because that's not an option in either. So in other words, from a Findlay perspective, is it better to split and have some of them stay, the ones that have that walking opportunity to stay to Stoller stay, or is it better to move the whole school? So I don't think that's an option that we have on any of our maps.
And that's a question for you and the committee to start discussing. So John, congratulations. I think you just started the advisory committee's discussion. So I want to observe to everybody here, there are two trays or cups of pens in front of Mike and in front of Jason. That does not mean Mike and Jason get to go up to the maps by themselves. What I would do is I would invite any of you, and John, I'm looking at you generally right now, to take a pen, take a position, whatever it is that you want to do, and kick us off on that discussion, because I think that is a fundamental question to ask when it comes to creating an attendance boundary for Stoller.
Now,
sorry. The feeder question is what I'm calling a layered question that comes in the next phase of this project, where you can stand up there and say, hey, this boundary works, but there are other questions that need to be evaluated, and that would be, obviously, feeder, would be accessibility and walkability, it would be transportation costs, it would be demographics, all the rest of it. Because you could turn around and say, you know what, I believe that not splitting the school is critically important. But somebody else in the committee might turn around and say, but having students not be able to walk across the street and go to Stoller, that's a problem that they have, and you as a committee are going to have to work through that. Don't work through it tonight, because we won't be able to get through any of the objectives that we have. That is coming. That is a discussion that we must have. So, is that okay?
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Abhishek.
Right, so where are you going to start?
I don't have something to put on a map yet in that question. I really would just like to hear commentary on that question. Or are we not considering moving all of Finley to the new middle school? Is that just not an option? And just, at the time we get the public comment, if someone has a strong point of view on that, I'd be interested to hear about it.
I wanted to start off with the two goals that you mentioned. And I think the question you posed for the committee of which of the teams have the potential to make the objective. And then I think as we continue, and as we go through it, I think this will just bubble up. Does that sound okay?
Repeat your question. Can you repeat it?
So I'm going to start off the discussion on the question that Steve has posed to the committee on which of the theme maps have the potential to meet the district objective. Right. It's a little hard to keep the mic and the mouth at the constant position. So first of all, again, thanks for providing the data and making that available to everyone. I think everybody understands this is a hard problem, and I wanted today to focus only on the numbers, like you said, the first layer. Right? And in terms of my goal, this is our first meeting to start our discussion, so we missed one. There's a lot of ground to cover. I really want to have a dialogue. There are multiple concerns even on the southern side in terms of feeder and distance, and we'll get to that. But today I just first wanted to focus on the first two questions that you have posed. Right? There's a lot of data that has been given to us, and that is a great thing because that brings some objectivity to this discussion. And I'm only going to utilize what has been provided to you guys online. So the first thing is that I found interesting was in the question and answer section, the district has given us a direction, and it says the district's goal is to have all students in classrooms within the permanent structure. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but you get the gist of what they are trying to say. And actually, if you look at the numbers in the theme maps, both on the what is the net resident population versus the permanent capacity, I think that sort of tells you where the district's mindset is. With that said, to understand the stored overcrowding, just looking at the numbers, how do we do the long-term solution, right? So I wanted to go back to the first Excel file that Steve gave us. It has the middle school enrollment number. And I'm sorry, I think if you can all work with me, I think you can also spot mistakes if I'm making one mistake. So Stoller hit a resident subtotal of 1,400 in 2015, and that includes general education and so on. And that has kept on growing, and today it is at 1,557, right? And it is at 1,223 in general education, and Soma is 334. But general education is 1,223, capacity is 1081. Given what the district's directive is, Stoller is overcrowded. So I think from the direction that has been given, with or without Soma today, Stoller has a problem. Right? I mean, that's fair to say. So with that in mind, I looked at all the teams. And I'm not going to look at the big ones they gave today, but the ones that are emailed. Right? And that's why I think Jason, your question was answered, but let's do that math together, right? So if I look at theme 1, and just to confuse us, we have used some different terms here, but I think I follow. So the net resident students here, if you look at theme 1, this is the number of students that Stoller will have without any options program, everything they know. Okay? That is 1256 in 2025 versus 1223 that is today. And the grand total on site is 1558 versus 1557 that is today. Since the intent is to have a long-term solution, I don't think we can go through a mapping exercise and come to a stage which is backwards. I think team 1 is making it worse, right? And you can, like John highlighted, team 4 you can say is an offshoot of team 1, and that makes it worse. So I don't think team 1 or team 4, the numbers are telling us that is not going, does not have the potential to make the boundary. So going into team 2, just focusing on the 2 district objectives, this does have the potential to meet both the objectives. There's a lot of work to be done on 5 Oaks. I think we should focus our energies on which elementaries feed into which middle school to optimize video patterns and the numbers and the capacity usage. Theme 3, you can say it's an offshoot of theme 2. And I found it interesting because in my mind, if I were to put Oak Hills, why not Rock Creek? That numbers may not match. But I think the important point, and John, I'm going to do this exercise live, so bear with me. I was looking at the elementary schools projections that CE gave for each elementary. And if you look at the 5 feeder school patterns that I mentioned, there are a couple of points that are important to know, right, that are almost missed initially. My initial thought was, if the resident population is going down a little bit, why am I not closer to 1081? I think there are a couple of things. One thing that is happening is 2 out of the 3 K-8 programs are closed. So the number of options to go outside is now less. So it is no longer 50%. It's much less than that. So what you're subtracting is going down. Right? The other thing is, if you look at the elementary school projections, which I remember earlier, Springville and Sato for grades 6 to 8, that total comes to be 1100, right? Which is actually more than the Stoller capacity. And you're going to have to add, I would assume, Jacob Wismar, which will take you to 1500. So to do the math on that, I mean, it's not in the maps, but if you look at again theme 1 and for the options attending outside, it lists 108 here, which has 1/3 of Finley. Should Finley be removed, the contribution from Finley into that will go away. So that subtraction number will be less than 108. I don't know how much it is, which is I think what Jason asked. I would, for ease of calculation, would say something like 100. Right? And the next time is the SUMA calculation, which is 221 here. And the Timberland calculation shows 81 coming out of the 2/3 of Finley. So if 1/3 gets removed, you would say about 40 of that will get removed. Right? So 221 plus 108, if you subtract that from 1500 and then add back 50, that would go away. I think you would still end up close to 1220, something closer to that. Right? So just from math point of view, numbers, I mean, of course, you can say for 1081, let's do all combinations and then also create Jacob Wismar as a number and see if that gets removed, what happens. And we can do that. But I think the fundamental problem that we have to address is, when we talk about long term, when do we want to come back to the same position, right? And if population is more, the contribution from to elementary schools is more than the permanent capacity. How does that work with the district objective? So I think that's what my thought was, and again, I just used numbers, like Steve said, and from the numbers, it looks to me option 2 or theme 2, and potentially theme 3. The one thing I like about theme 3 is, I think one that Michelle brought up in terms of Meadow Park feeding into multiple high schools. Meadow Park could feeds into 3 high schools, and maybe that would help there. I don't know, but there's a lot of work to be done, and I think that's where we should spend our energy. Thanks.
Michelle?
Realistically, does a portable ever get removed once it's installed at a school?
Realistically, yes, they do. There is a cost associated with it, though, and as much as we try to sell them, it still has a cost associated with them. For example, with the work that we've done at Five Oaks, those portables are gone. For the boundary adjustment that we did at El Monaco with Michael on the advisory committee, those portables are being sold and will be removed. So they do get removed. It just takes time.
Okay. So I guess I'm wondering how much of our energy should be focused on the permanent capacity. It seems to me if the portables are there, we may as well utilize them, not pushing it, to include all of it, but I mean, disregarding it seems, I don't know, it seems unnecessary.
That is going to be a subject for you to weigh. The board objective is clear. And if you as a committee are saying, board, we see you, we hear you, but our rationale, our deliberations brought us to this point, okay, we'll carry that recommendation forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we are seeing is that it's almost like any 3 elementary schools near solar that we put in there is going to push it over the permanent capacity. Doesn't matter which 3 we do. I personally think an easy way to reduce capacity is to move SUMA. I mean, there's a lot of solar SUMA kids, but I think you set SUMA aside and then you look at which school has the capacity to take it and you put it there.
I think, Divya, you were first, and then Jennifer after that.
Yeah, I think that I know. Michelle, about the portables, I do want to bring your attention back to what we said earlier about the legacy students. Those shouldn't be assuming portables is removed. I think it should be considered as an operation for the legacy students on site because of how the shift is. Yeah, through long term it may add us some relief, but in the interim, I suggest we look at the permanent capacity and consider portables for legacy students accommodation.
I wanted to go back to Michelle's comment about the SUMA programs. I was looking at the data, and to me, I think it's a good thing to discuss because I see that STOLR has, 334 SUMA students, whereas the other 3 have far less. Why couldn't we look at spreading it out and making it more even to help ease some of that overcrowding and utilize those schools where they have those programs?
That is an option you can discuss. Bill, you're next.
Okay. Yeah, so I think I agree with Abhijit saying team 2 seems to be the closest when you just look at the data to something that can get us close to achieving the first two objectives. But there's some things I just noticed about team 2. It seems that in trying to solve the overcrowding problem in solar, that team is actually creating a new problem in Five Oaks, where you do have 134% utilization. And so my proposal, and in team being, I could see that there's an underutilization of Timberland. So the 2025 projections keep Timberland at 7%. And amongst all the teams, I think most of them ranked around 60 something. So I wouldn't think it's very wise to build a new middle school and not really use its full capacity while you have other schools that are about 100 and something percent. So my thoughts were one of two options. Either one, moving the summer program from Stola and keeping that in Timberland, so that at least we could drive more utilization for Timberland, or alternatively taking one of the more stable elementary schools in terms of population, like the Bethany, and probably putting that in Timberland. The benefit with that would be that it's going to reduce the utilization of Five Oaks, and at the same time beef up the utilization of Timberland. So,
Christy, I think you're next.
I wanted to ask you, Steve, the first objective from the board is to create obviously an attendance boundary for the Timberland Middle School. And based on the information you provided, that is about 800 students to create a comprehensive middle school program. Is that 800 students, does that not include any options or SUMA programs that get moved, would possibly be moved to Timberland?
I would defer that to our administrator for middle schools, Ken Struckmeyer. Ken, did you hear that question? Okay, Chrissy?
When we're considering the enrollment projection, the enrollment target for Timberland of about 800 students to create a comprehensive middle school program, that was in the documentation provided to us. Does that include, can that number include SUMA and other options programs that might get moved to Timberland?
Yes, we don't have any idea about that now, but recommendations from the committee would be entertained, and that's part of your charge.
Okay, Jason.
So just picking up on some of the things that have been said by others, I do like in general the notion, thinking about moving the SUMA program as an idea. The difficult thing is, we heard in the community, when you talk about moving one elementary school, you're picking one over another. Someone seems to be, they feel like they've been treated unfairly. But when you think of the SUMA program as an options program, and you look at the various options programs around the district, virtually everyone participating in one doesn't go to their home school. So in that sense, while it's been a benefit to the Solar community to have that program there, and it's made sense because there's so many people there, we're not assigning an unfair situation. We're kind of giving them more of the status quo. Looking at the maps, just at the various themes, I mean, I think they all, none of them quite got there for me, because although, I mean, they were created without numbers. And as you look at them, you see people trying to make sensible boundaries based on geography. But what we're running into is the schools aren't placed in a necessarily sensible location. I mean, let's face it, you could design a golf course that covers Cedar, Timberland, and Meadow Park. And they're all clustered right there. That'll be the task for our last meeting. And so you end up, there's almost no way to avoid something that failed the eyeball test. And then one measure I have for that is, you hate to see somebody driving past another school to get to their school they're going to be at. But I fear there's almost no way to avoid it. The problems with 2 and 3 that I saw is, on that eastern edge of the district, there's just not a lot of people there. So as you draw people out of Cedar Park, there's not an obvious place to pull them back in, because that boundary borders with Whitford, Meadow, and both of those schools are well under pocket, under their capacity now. So you solve one problem and create another problem that isn't easily solved. So I had an idea for another approach, and it really started with a couple of things. One was, I mentioned the email.
As you get going, bring that microphone closer to your mouth.
Sorry. I mentioned the numbers obviously sent around, and he's just done the calculations to take the options programs out. And what it amounts to is the solar population we're talking about. We're anticipating 1,745 kids there. And as he mentioned, if we're targeting 90% of permanent capacity, that's 973 kids. In other words, we've got to move 772, 44%. And it's virtually half the population needs to move. And he included the 5 projected populations, with the options out. So Findlay was 266, Jacob Wismer 329, Rock Creek 214, Saddle 475, Springville 461. And the number is very daunting, but it actually occurred to me, it opened my eyes to what I think might be let's just say a different approach to the problem. I mean, 1745, and we're trying to get down to 800-900. It's almost cut it in half. And it's a different thing when you're thinking about, okay, there's 5 kids show up to play basketball. You've only got 4 spots on the team. Someone's not going to play. Well, that person's going to go back. But if 10 show up and now you're going to split it into 2 equal halves, it's a different, psychologically, it's a different scenario. Because I happen to be just grousing about the very aggressive target. I mean, 90% of permanent capacity is a very aggressive target, given how highly utilized those portables are there. I was grousing about that with one of our school board members, and she says, yeah, Jason, that's the reason we built this other school. It's to provide relief at Timberland. Now, obviously, it's not in the optimum spot to do that, because the people we need to move are up and to the left, and the school is down at the right. But the thought that occurred to me, the other thing, and I'm going to grant you, there's some aspects about this that sound off, that they're going to look off. But it's this: if we think of this as a Stoller problem, we've got 1,745 kids. We need to get nearly half of them out. We have an additional school to do it. How do we divide that population in ways? And can we do it where we're only focused on that population, so we're not now cascading the chain of problems? One of the things I don't like about needs 2 and 3 is to fulfill both objectives. If you're going straight from Stoller to Timberland, you've killed 2 birds with 1 stone. But for every student that you take out of Stoller but don't hurt in Timberland, you conceivably need to disrupt another 1 or 2 or maybe 3 kids to get them over, to rotate the population over. So then I'll just jump to it. Take Findlay. Take Jacob Wisdom. Send them to Timberland. Rock Creek, Springville, Sodom, stay. That's going to put, I'm going to fumble this math here, but Findlay was 266, Jacob Wisner is 329. There's 600 out of our 772. You then say between those 2 schools, there's going to be a SUMO program in 1 building. And it's in Timberland also. So that's going to siphon off the percentage of kids in Springville, Sodom, and Rock Creek, the new SUMO program, bring them down into Timberland. I think you've got 2 relatively balanced populations. Kids moving out of Stoller are going to be separated potentially from their friends. But it's done in a way that is, they're closest to their neighbors. And you can just think of the splitting that population into 2 instead of some going down to 5 Oaks, some to Timberland, some to staying. In my mind, it may be less disruption to the community. And of course, it's taking the downside is, of course, it just kills the walking zones to Stoller, which is horrible. But if you then think about what the commute times are, say from those populations down to Timberland, compared to, say Rock Creek, Springville, over to Stoller, they're maybe in the same ballpark, maybe not equal. But it's trying to take that one population, split it up in a somewhat equitable way. It's about, I wouldn't mind seeing a map about it.
All right, Amajad, I think you had your agenda. Okay, Sharice?
I think that's a really interesting idea, and I'm glad that Suma's on the table talking about all this. But part of this, I think that we may be looking at this from the wrong direction. If you look at all of the theme maps, nothing really has been touched in the south or in the east side of the district. And if you look at a lot of those permanent seats open, we're at the 300s in a lot of them. So I almost think we need to work up. And by the time we get those schools to where they need to be at capacity, we're going to have an idea of what neighborhoods we have left in the north that have not been allocated. Just move it around to move kind of down. Might be another way to tackle this if we don't want to do a direct plop over. But to do that, there's a lot of split feeders in the south. Is that data in here? Like, for instance, we go to Nancy Riles, we split to Highland Park and Conestoga. Is there a number in our packets that shows how many kids go to each one?
No, but we can get you that information. I would have to say that I think that I'd have to go back and look at the materials, but I think we have, I think we provided the enrollment from different schools in, I think we have the data. I don't think we put it in something that's as obvious, stating X number go to Highland and Y number goes to Mountain View, but we can certainly do that. Very good.
So a few points that were discussed, I wanted to talk about that. Jason, so 90% thing I also found interesting initially. Why is it that the district is saying that? And then when Steve's email came out about district wanting to say clear direction on they wanted permanent structures, if you look at the maps numbers, I think from a district point of view, I understand why that's happening. So the total expected to attend on-site is 7752, but total permanent capacity is 863. That's about 90%. And the way I think they want to use portables, one was legacy. But you never know what options percentage people are going to take. And should nobody go to any options program, and just do an ISP and empty, then you want to have capacity. And actually it does start tally up the total projection divided by total capacity, including portables. Now, again, the total capacity is more. So that's what that works. And the second point about what you made of splitting the 5 schools to 200 schools, that's a great point. I think we should first maybe define what are the boundary rules that we would want to adhere to, right? In terms of whether it is walking zones, we want to respect that, or whether it is split feeder, we don't want to do, whatever that is. And I think split feeders, at some point we're going to have to talk about that now. I was glad to see in 2 and 3, none of the big elementaries were not split. I do believe the impact of that on the kids might be more than what we like to think. And the only reason is that because nobody else who has been experiencing has come out in support of that. Now you can always argue, well, only 5 people have responded, and that's true. Again, it's a very subjective topic without any proper objective criteria to judge that. But what I would say is, as I mentioned in Theme 2, we have work to do on what weeks where, and no doubt there are other schools that have been impacted. I think that's one of the reasons why we are here to make that comprehensive. Now, but like you said, if one of the big schools, if that feeds, anything feeding into timberland will solve or will mitigate the cascading effect. That's a given, right? So I would say let's first come up with what we think are the boundaries we should respect most of the times, and then let's come up with ideas that we would like to ask you for maps from, right? And I think, to me at least, if an elementary boundaries encompassing the middle school, and that to ask that elementary to feed to another one, that's simply too far to go. I would rather make the argument of if one of the two schools has to feed into another one, then which one could that be? Or should be Five Oaks, should be Timberland? Granted, it does not satisfy the high test that you mentioned. But we got to have something as constraints and then build on that.
So I'm going to go with Vivian and then Mike.
So Jason, thank you for that idea. I've been thinking about it. And I did the math a little bit to understand why just these two schools are not sufficient. Not with US 26, if you count the number of middle schoolers by 2025, is 3,475. The permanent capacity from Stoller and Timberline together is 2,180. It feels to me like it's impossible for these two schools to accommodate all of north of US 26. We will have to rely on the south schools a little bit more than what we are doing today. It is not ideal proximity-wise, either to Findlay or Springville, but I do not see us getting away from not utilizing the south schools that is available today. The other point is the split feeder. So going back to the point that Christy just made, I do want us to work from south because that kind of frees up Five Oaks or Meadow Park or Cedar Park, and that can determine which of those north side of US 26 should go into the south. So if I can bring the committee members' focus back to the south a little bit, and let's discuss the split feeders overall for BSD, not just for Findlay. Should we keep the split feeders or not overall for BSD? I have spent quite a few number of hours reading online comments. I don't think the public or the community members, schools, teachers, none of them prefer split feeders. So I asked BSD, please, in fact, to actually look at the south of the district, and if we can actually get away from split feeder, let's start working that from south, move up, and see which schools freeze up, and that kind of determines what we do to the US 26 north side.
All right, Mike, you're up.
So I took a look at this from the perspective of minimizing as much disruption as possible for the students. When I do that, theme one seems to stand out. When I look at the numbers provided to us, Findlay and Springville are not both going to be able to go to Stoller. And tonight we're focusing on the numbers. If you simply take Findlay, move it to Timberland, you almost have the numbers in line with that V1 map already drawn. I think it is important to consider the SUMA that everyone else has brought up this evening too. But again, very simply, I just think that V1 makes more sense with respect to minimizing that disruption. As I look at down the line and we start considering the sand, as you call it, with respect to proximity, travel time, I think it's going to be a tough road to show that moving Springville to Five Oaks is going to make much sense. So, again, just from a numbers perspective, I encourage the committee tonight to take a strong look at V1 and moving the entire Finley school down.
All right, Monica.
I just wanted to comment on some of the,
You're going to have to make that thing really close, like, almost like repeating it.
Can you hear me? Okay, so, some comments following up on Jason. So I talked a lot about this with the groups as we were forming boundary maps with the public, is the idea of split feeders at the middle school level versus split feeders at the elementary level, and the importance of the impact of that of the younger students versus kind of middle school, where I kind of feel like it's harder for the kids. But I just wanted to say it with the committee to see if there's any common thoughts about split feeders we had to make that choice or drawing the lines. If we would want to put that at the elementary level or the middle school level. The idea of starting at the south, I think, I do see that specifically two neighboring middle schools, Cedar Park and Mountain View, definitely have opportunity to absorb some of the impacts, because across the map, solar and Five Oaks are hit pretty hard. So while it's more disruptive to move more schools, there are several schools that are at the boundary of Cedar Park and Mountain View that could absorb and then allow decisions with Five Oaks and solar to be a little bit more clear. And then if we had to make a decision on Fenley, I think I wanted to comment on the option of possibly modifying the boundaries of Fenley a little bit based off of walkability, because with Jacob Wismer, I have a hard time sending Jacob Wismer away from solar. And so it seems like several grids that are on the Jacob Wismer's Fenley boundary could kind of change a little bit to move populations, but I don't know how popular that elementary school boundary change is.
Okay, we'll change all the elementary school boundaries while we're at it. I'm totally kidding. Please, we're not doing that. Michelle.
I am glad you're talking about feeders from middle school to high school, because I feel like at our last meeting, we were getting a lot of elementary school parents, and not the parents who have experienced it. My personal opinion is, for an elementary school that is split into two high schools, it's best for them to be split at the middle school point, rather than for them to go through K through 8 and then bye-bye, friend. But I do think that feeders, in the comments that I'm reading, feeders are really, really important to everybody. And especially like a school like Nancy Wiles, where there's a tiny pocket where 80–90% of the kids are going to one place and these other few kids are not. I think we really have to fix that. And I think the south side has been hit hard because of the high school boundaries sort of tearing up the middle school boundaries and dividing the communities down there.
Thank you. John.
Thank you, Stephen. I did have one question and then two quick comments. The question, this might be obvious or self-evident, I just want to make sure I understand the numbers correctly. So if I look at the original data for today, using Conestoga as an example, because it is the south one that we have a conversation about today, it says we have 963 students there. So if I look at your projections for 2025, without any changes to boundaries, it is 1,165. So is that encompassing all of the expected growth from all the new homes?
That is correct.
Okay. And then does that keep Conestoga in its 90% capacity or incapacity?
So I would have to do the math on that. If I'm looking, that's the residents. It's something that we could figure out very quickly.
Okay.
You know, the numbers are here. I just have to do the math.
Okay, thank you. Because I do think the exercise of just trying to draw out the question on the two objectives without looking all the way up is a really smart thought. I think we will come up with a map that we will edit and revise. It won't ultimately work. So it feels like an exercise in futility to me to do that. I do think, going back to a couple of the points that we've had, my second point is I think we would be, if we use our time, would be to have a conversation about our values of what we value. And going back to answer the question I posed to start this, when I think about split feeders, I don't want them either, but I am a South Side parent and I do have kids that split both places. And while not ideal, it is something that happens, and my kids have adjusted and they've been fine. But I know that's not everyone's story. So I do think, though, what I'd like to do instead of just having I think everyone would agree that it's good not to have them, but what I'd like to do is maybe challenge it against other values, like walkability. So I think there's just a conversation to say what is more important, being able to have as many kids as possible be able to walk to their middle school, or is it more important to maintain a pure line all the way through K through 12?
So John, to answer your question here, the permanent capacity at Comstock is 960, and so we're a scotch over that right now in terms of current enrollment.
Okay, thank you. So that would then, to me, further support the argument that we need to work bottoms up, because we are also seeing a problem in the South Side that wasn't necessarily listed on the first two objectives.
And just to piggyback on that, I think it would be helpful to know which communities are completely bused to their middle school. So if I'm looking at Springville and assuming that all of Springville gets bused to Stolworth right now. And so if we know that all those kids are already bused together, if we're trying to keep people together, can we bus them to a different place that's the same distance?
Jason.
So just piggyback on the idea of just talking about, we talked about what are our guiding principles, what are all our values. So, and I can sort of kick it off, and I think it's tough to assess, say, across different things. It's going to depend, but even without leaving the idea of distance, you've got two ways of looking at it. Are we prioritizing short commutes, walkability, or are we avoiding long commutes? I can say for myself, I feel less bad. I feel bad in either case, but I feel less bad in taking away a potentially a situation where somebody is having it much better than the average, than in assigning a penalty to an area, saying, no, you're going to be much worse than the average. Again, just my point of view, I suspect we're on the table, we might get 50-50 on that. That's just my particular perspective. Now, as far as working south and north, I'm not sure that would complete if we really started from the ground up going that way. But I do hear the desire, and especially where we have more flexibility down in the south. What I think would be helpful is we talked before about having a map showing existing boundaries, and then the grid goes populated with our projected 2025 numbers. If we took that and then just highlighted this area is split, this area is split, I think that'll be a really easy way to say, like, okay, these 4 grid codes are an issue. Do we have room at one of the neighboring schools? So I think that would be almost, I would think that as a separate exercise than trying to split up Stoller. But I absolutely agree it's worth taking a look at. I think we just need that map and the data to know how far we can get.
Christy.
I wanted to build on the idea of working from the south and going north. There were a lot of some online comments from a few schools that have split feeders, and it was surprising to me. There was a comment earlier about, do you prefer walkability in a split feeder versus You know, is it better to have a split feeder and have some students walk to their middle school versus eliminating that split feeder? And there were some comments that they preferred being able to eliminate that split feeder, even if it meant that they were no longer able to walk to their middle school. But I think that is not necessarily, it's not a black and white situation where I can say we need to prioritize walkability in all cases, because it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. But I think given that there's been such a strong emphasis on the northern part of the district, and basically the southern boundaries have not shown any changes at all. None of the theme maps, none of the maps show any changes to any of the current middle school boundaries. And so I think it would be valuable to start discussing maybe eliminating some of those split feeders so we can see how that looks.
I'm going to make an observation here. We have 18 minutes-ish before we open up for public testimony, and I do want to get to that at 8 o'clock. So just doing a time check, I'm not saying we need to stop or anything, but let's keep in mind that I do want direction from you. I'm getting lots of good ideas here, and we have work to do over the winter break. But I would like to reserve some time to be sure that you're telling me, Steve, I want, or not I, we want facts. So, John, okay.
Thanks. Just to build a bit on what Jason said, I think the map with the data would be helpful. And then I go all the way back to my very first opening comment, and that would be then just an analysis, just a pure computer-driven model on building the best map, south up, with no split feeders. And just show what would that look like. Just a pure map from the district, taking in some considerations at the top, but just saying, if we moved everyone into a 90% capacity with no split feeders, this is what that map would look like. I think that would be an interesting map versus us trying to, continue to sort of like whittle away small neighborhoods and sort of guess on our own. I think that would be a map that we could start a conversation on, and then leverage the theme maps to make some adjustments.
Okay, I'm going to ping pong here. So Mike and then Divya.
Thanks, Steve. You asked what we would like for the next meeting. What I'd like is to see a map that shows the theme one here, but with the following changes: moving the entire Findlay school to Timberland and taking Suma out of Stoller and moving it to Cedar Park. I'd like to see what that looks like.
Yeah.
Okay, just to lighten up the mood, going back to the values, walking versus split feeder. I live in Jacob, is no walking distance. Weather doesn't cooperate, so. How many, I just, for a quick poll, it's a small set, but how many, can you please raise your hand if the child walked to school today? Okay. All right, thank you. So what I want for the next meeting is to piggyback on what Mike has said, same theme one map, removing Findlay, but also add the next granularity, which is the transportation overhead for transporting the Suma kids from, all this other neighborhoods that are not going to be in the boundary. So yeah, show the next level of data, next granularity, transportation, agency, and all that too. Oh, and also I want to maintain the...
Sorry, your time's up. It's too easy. Go ahead.
All right. Also, the second map I would like to see is going back to John's point, preserving the feeders across the district. How would an ideal map look like?
All right, Shrees.
I definitely want to see what John requested for sure on that map. The other thing I would like to see is a map that has the elementary school boundaries and the high school boundaries only, so that we could pull and really look at those feeder patterns with the actual enrollment on the elementary schools, and if we could have that roughly by neighborhood, in case we were trying to do some magic, that would be great.
So when you're saying you want only the elementary and the high school with the values with the numbers, you're talking about you're talking about the middle school numbers?
The elementary actual numbers. So like we have here on the utilization and the true capacity, not the resident data, the actual capacity of what's attending at the elementary school level. Because if we're going to try and keep those feeders intact, having that true enrollment number on there by elementary school that we can then push into a middle school and then ultimately try and keep inside high school boundary.
Abdul.
So just kind of sticking to our objective today, we're trying to basically split solar to get to 90% and also trying to populate Timberland to middle school minimum. I think on that note, I would like to make some adjustment to TMAP 2. It's going to be like two variations. One was basically the point I said before, where you move Bethany Elementary to go to the Timberland Middle School. The other variation would be keeping Bethany Elementary at 5 Oaks, but moving Finley instead to Timberland Middle School, and also moving the summer program out of Stoller. So I think those two variations are like feasible ideas to push.
Monica.
So I like the ideas that we're asking for more maps, but I do know we do have the goal to come up with a map or maps tonight, themes tonight on our own. And we're talking a lot about starting from the south and to piggyback off of yours. See if we can make some considerations again back to Mountain View and Cedar Park, and where those neighboring elementary schools could absorb to relieve so a little Hoover or Barnes, if they could move the neighboring middle school in that theme map as well to see how that balances out, because I really across each of these themes, those are really heavily underutilized, between 40 and 60%. I think we should capitalize on that.
Will do. Okay. We have two members who are watching live stream, and we have a comment from Marnie, so we're going to let David do that.
She just chimes in to add, sorry she couldn't be here, watching with a broken foot from home. She'd really like to see the example map with no split feeders that people are talking about. That would be great. And then really wants to see sort of greater highlighting on that map of the middle schools that are currently under capacity.
All right, I'm going to ask Yasmin to step up. You guys have already dominated proceedings, so she is no longer going to be the smartest person in the room. Obertika will be the smartest person in the room until I ask her to speak. So.
Okay, so I have a question. Every time we speak about moving SUMA from Stoller, we assume the 300 kids are going to Timberland. Does SUMA program have its own boundaries? So, I mean, if you live on the west and you do not have SUMA and Stoller, but you qualify for SUMA, I think you go to Meadow Park. You will not go to Timberland. Or is this something that we should discuss? Oh, should I repeat that?
Yeah, please repeat.
So again, every time we speak about SUMA, we say it's going to, if we are going to move it out of Stoller, we assume it's going to Timberland, and the 300 kids are moving from here to there. My question is, does the SUMA program have its own boundaries? So if you live on the west side and you don't have SUMA in Stoller anymore, does this mean you go to Meadow Park? And would that be more pressure on Meadow Park? Does this affect the numbers? It might be clear to other people that I don't know about how it's going to work.
Right. We can provide we can provide you information, probably kind of heat map-ish, if not grid code map-ish, or grid code specific on where our SUMA students are coming from. So you can see where that is. In terms of allocation of who goes where, Ken, I'm going to defer to you.
Originally, when SUMA started, there was a north site at the Meadow Park campus, south side of Whitford. We had trends of a lot of students in the north, and students in the central part had been at Meadow. We had practices where students from the Stoller catchment would be bused to the Whitford site. That became a concern about students arriving late, students on the bus a long time. So over time, it was wise, and there was more capacity at Stoller at that time. Then in northern, a third site was added. Eventually, another one was added at Cedar Park and at Highland Park. And both of those are being consolidated. So generally, we have a southern feed now at the Whitford campus where students from Mountain View, Conestoga, and Whitford are on that campus. And Highland, I missed that, I'm sorry. And then we have a Five Oaks and Cedar Park consolidation at Meadow, and the balance are at the Stoller site.
Thank you. Jennifer.
One of the things I would like to see is we're starting to look at walkability and, looking at what would be best for that is maybe a map of what the district considers walkable, like what neighborhoods around the middle schools they consider to be a walkable distance. I'm not sure what that is. My kids live 1.5 miles from school, but they walk it sometimes. But that may not be everybody else's case. So I'd like to see what the district considers walkable.
We do have that data. It is online for the walkability. It's easy for us to produce that and make it readily available to you. Yeah. I think, Jason, you were next.
In terms of data for next time, definitely the walk zones, the safe walk zones for each school, including Timberland, would be great. I would also love to see it at least for the 5 elementary school zones in Stoller. And maybe don't see more of those, strike me as the highest priority. Let's pick 2 or 3 representative data points on the map and calculate and give us a Google Maps distance to the 2 or 3 nearest schools. So basically, any time we're proposing moving from one area to another, I want to know what that delta is. And since some of these zones are oddly shaped, we should do it from just one spot. If that makes sense. The other thing to say, one thing I want us to be cautious about is as we talk about, okay, let's change this with Peter, let's do that. Overwhelmingly, the number one bit of public feedback we hear is, why are you changing this? I moved here counting on this, and now it's being changed. I mean, I think we can all assume most people aren't wanting split feeders, but I'm cautious about pulling the rug out from under somebody without first hearing that that's what they want. And should we get to the point of entertaining cleaning up a split feeder in an area where we've really got no capacity issues, I would hope we would explore that in a way that it has some very aggressive grandfathering. So if somebody really was counting on going to that middle school, that elementary school, they can continue to do so. It's one thing if capacity is driving a decision. If it's an arbitrary choice made by people, I'm not so comfortable if we're not hearing public feedback specifically asking for that. And the last thing I'll say is, tying into all of this, we started off talking about, why were the portables chosen to be removed. We've talked about how we've got our own values here in terms of how we do this. It would not be the worst thing in the world in my mind if at some point we had a select different options and actually reached out to the Stoller community. Going back to telling me earlier, it was told me we're essentially doing this for them, and we should do everything we can to get their how exactly they would prioritize between these different and conflicting values, rather than us just make a best guess based on our own.
Okay, noting the clock, we have 4 minutes, so we'll go with Abhijit and then we'll finish up with Fatika.
So first, like what John said, I think we should spend time prioritizing our values. I think that will drive the next discussion. I just don't know when we will get the time to do that. Maybe first meeting after school break. But in terms of what I would like to ask is combination of the ideas that are in Team 1 and Team 2. So in the Team 2, what I would like is if Aloha Hoover. So in both cases, what I observed is Cedar Park and Mountain View are less utilized. Cedar Park consistently has been less utilized in all of these, right? And it's because Timberline has divided that, like Jason pointed out. So one variation I would like to see is Bethany for in Team 2 continue to feed into Meadow Park as it is, with the exception of Aloha Hoover either feeding into Mountain View. If you want to keep spacing south for the future growth, that looking at how it would look like if Aloha Hoover feeds into Cedar Park. That's one. And the second point I wanted to make was when we talk about different aspects of whether it's split feeder or walkability or proximity, these, like you said, there are layers that come after. And I was of the assumption that we have been given 2 goals, and we have to have options that meet those goals. If an option does not meet the goal, that does not qualify. And then within those options, which is the best one? Now, I think we should not get things mixed up. Like to Jason, your point, the proximity has been used so differently in public comments. That is sort of get lost in that, right? Some people have said it's near to me, some people have said it's near to the school. And it's clear that proximity and feeder are actually opposing qualities. Right? And I think there were 4 people who have commented like that. If you really want to be fair in proximity, and today the proximity is gathered from the school, because the busing rules are made from the school, not from the grid codes. Right? District doesn't say from the grid code, walk 1.5 miles and we'll pick you up there. District says people who are within 1.5 miles of the school should walk, we will not pick you up there. Right? So if you really want to be fair to proximity from neighborhood, I think maybe it was Michelle, I can't remember. But you have to really draw a line from Stoller to Timberline. Take that as your diameter. Right? Take half the distance, draw a circle around Stoller, draw a circle around Timberline. So everybody in that circle, nobody else can be closer than that. Right? And that would be fair. It would cause splits, sure. But that would be fairness on proximity. Maybe we should look at a map like that. But the one question that has still has struggled to answer, I would like guidance there. In nowhere, whether it's policy JC or in the district codes, has district mentioned to minimize the overall coverage across everything. I think that should come out as a cost, but I haven't seen that in any of either the policy or the objectives. So how do we reconcile that? Is that something we should discuss further?
So I would observe that one of our attendees here on staff is the Administrator for Transportation, Craig Beaver. And Mr. Beaver has a very thorough history of scoping out routes, times, costs, mileage, etc. So his department is very much data-driven and is able to provide that level of detail to you. Through the high school process, we went through a lot of different analysis in terms of all of that, where the committee, I'm just going to speak for Mr. Beaver, that you will get reports on mileage, time, cost, for number of routes, all of that as you look at these ideas. It will be illuminating to you. You'll be surprised how much time and how much cost is associated. You'll also be surprised on the inverse, where you think, boy, this is a long distance, it's going to take a lot of time, but based on time of travel, based on a bunch of different factors, it's actually a lot shorter than you might feel. So, I don't know if Mr. Beaver wants to speak to this at all, but he is, okay. Write it down, he just agreed with me. We are past 8 o'clock. We are not going to lose the 20 minutes of testimony. Tika, why don't you end this off? Finish us off here.
I just wanted to say really quick that I'm a huge proponent for moving Finley out of Stoller and taking it to Timberland, because I really don't like split feeders. My middle school split. For those of you that don't know, I'm a high school student in the district, and my middle school split, so 2/3 of my middle school went to one high school, and then a third went to another one. And it was like not the greatest outcome, and like I did lose a lot of friends just because we never really got a chance to see each other. So coming from like a personal experience with that as a student, I think that I do agree that walkability is super important, but I honestly see it as a lesser of two evils if we're taking Springville to Stoller, because there's no way that realistically that Springville and Finley can both attend Stoller. So if Springville having to be bused to 5 Oaks, I think is just horrendous because they have to go across 26, and we know how bad that can be. But Finley just having to ride the bus to Timberland, which is honestly not that far away, I think is a really good idea. I also want to ask, if we're moving SUMA out of Stoller, are we going to just put all the SUMA kids at Timberland, or are we going to just take the students from SUMA? Just the students from Stoller, put them into Timberland?
Well, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to bring a map of, SUMA students, where they're located by grid code, so you'll see where it is. We'll also take a look at, capacities, to be able to accommodate. Let's just say we have a SUMA location in Timberland, and instead of at Meadow Park in Stoller, it's now all at Timberland. Do we even have the room to do it? And so the question is Timberland the right place? And that, again, is part of the conversation that you as a committee would have to have. You have to also include the teaching and learning department in terms of just the functionality of having, that many students in one location, if there is an operational issue. So those are important questions that we would have to weigh and bring to the committee. Okay. With that, I'm going to ask the advisory committee to be sure that you have your microphone off, that green light is not on, because we don't need the feedback. Thank you. Make sure that PhD knows how to turn off the microphone. We have a whole bunch of people who have submitted testimony cards. And what we have done is we have spread we've stacked the testimony cards by attendance area in terms of elementary school attendance area. That's the finest grade. And we have 10 cards here that were drawn at random from the piles of folks who want to testify. We have 10 seats up front, and so people who may be in the gym, please listen, because your name may be called, and we would like for you to come in and sit up front. So I'm going to call 10 names. And if your name is called, I'd appreciate it if you please come up to the front here and have a seat. The people who are going to be asked to testify will have 2 minutes. We have a clock that will be up on the screen that you can see. I would want to be respectful of everybody's time, so please, if you get to 2 minutes, I will shut it down, and then we will move to the next person. So, as these cards are, as I read names, please come forward, and once we have all our seats filled, we'll start with the testimony. So first I have Stephen Liu. I have Fernie Olwafami. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Lauren Garrett. David Ramku. Heather Lambert. Kiran Patel. Liz Della Howard. Eric Simontel. April Powers. Last is Chuan Zhu of West TV Elementary area. So again, I apologize if I've butchered your names. I think we have our folks. Yeah, there's a seat over here. Okay. So, first up, okay. First up will be Mr. Liu, and Fernie, you're on deck. Mr. Liu.
Hi, all the committees and everybody. So I'm from Bethany Elementary School area. So what I think is, in my opinion, the most important thing, of course, is the resource, education resource for students. And I think the two objectives here is the most important things for this adjustment. And anything change should be related to these two changes. So I have reviewed all the theme part and math, and I think, in my opinion, actually the theme one is the best options. Because first, of course, it's like the Finley is closest to the Timberland, considering all the areas in the Stoller schools. And the other thing is the Rock Creek is the furthest is to the Stoller. And so that part is fine. But when I check the expected populations, it still seems the Stoller is still over capacity. So actually I have the same idea with some of the committees to move the SUMA program from the Stoller to Timberland, which will further reduce the student counts. And for the other theme map, and for other changes, which is not related to these two objectives, I feel it's nonsense. For example, my school, the Bethany Elementary School to Five Oaks, it doesn't solve any Stoller issues. It doesn't solve any Timberland objectives. So this is what I think. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Bernie, you're up. And on deck is Laura Garrett, or Lauren Garrett. Fernie Olwafami.
Sorry, I will be talking for the Springfield School.
All right.
Okay, thank you everybody for listening us through. I know this is a difficult process. I will straight go to objective 1, which is to feed Timberland. Finley is the only school that can contribute to objective 1 and also relieve overcrowding at Stoller, which is our objective 2, at the very same time. Most of Finley is actually really reasonably distant from Timberland. Finley, Bonnie Slope, Terra Linda, and Cedar Mill make perfect candidates for Timberland
because they align well with the feeder pattern to Sunset High School, aligns with the BSD zoning of all the Cedar Mill schools under one board member. Finley and Bonnie Slope are both IB schools, so it's a good grouping. Now, let's tackle objective 2. To start with, if we take theme 1 and at first just look at non-SUMA kids only in Stoller, we will have a great starting point of around 90% that almost meets our 2 objectives. As SUMA is an option program with just a handful of kids, we can decide where and how to accommodate it based on the availability of space. In any map that sends Springville all the way from North Bethany to Five Oaks, it overcrowds Five Oaks severely. So even in those themes, we are just moving the overcrowding down to the south with a ripple effect and underutilizing the new school as well as all the schools in the east. I would request not to penalize Springville by busing 400 odd kids 45 minutes each way when a more efficient alternative is available to us with a brand new school coming up. While walkability is a real privilege, but unreasonable long commute has severe ramifications on kids as well. So I would really request all the committee members to consider an equitable map for all kids so no kid is unfairly disadvantaged in terms of commute and socioeconomic and all other factors. Thank you.
Okay, now up is Ms. Garrett, and on deck is Mr. Rancoop.
Good evening, and I feel it was a hard act to follow because she's way more prepared than I am tonight. But I thank you all for the opportunity to speak. I'm a parent from Raleigh Park, so we're here. I know you haven't heard a lot from parents and community in the south part of the district, but I would like you to know we are watching, we are participating. There are multiple families here tonight, and we're learning, and it's a really important experience and opportunity for us to hear all of your thoughts and feedback. And a critical importance to us as one of the underpopulated and smaller schools in the district is the elimination of the split feeders. We do currently, right now, go to 2 different middle schools. It's not ideal. We're a tiny, uniquely small community, and to have kids separated at that young age is really challenging. I think there are opportunities to revisit that, and I like all of the thoughts that you've had tonight, but I would encourage you to put that at the top of the list, at least from our school's perspective. While walkability is fantastic and amazing, it isn't really an option for our school at whichever middle school we would end up at. And I do love that, and it would be an audacious and wonderful goal. I don't think it's reasonable or realistic for our community, but I do think it's a value that's important, and I appreciate all of the thought and commitment you put into this. I know it's a lot of work. Thank you.
Mr. Rancoop, before you start, on deck is Ms. Lambert.
Thank you, David Rancoop from the Finley community. I wanted to thank you all for participating in this exercise. I know you've got hundreds of happy customers behind me. I also thank you for setting up very clear objectives, with one being to populate Timberland and the second being to right-size Scholar. And from assessing the maps and the underlying numbers, it's clear that only theme 2 accomplishes that goal. Themes 1, 3, and 4 do not come close to right-sizing Stoller. They just push the problem further down the road and make it harder to manage. Versus theme 2 is challenging in terms of increasing busing distance by a mile, but it doesn't include taking communities who are currently within walking distance and getting them to be bused 3 to 4 miles away. So if you look at the net result of the increase in distance in terms of busing, taking out Finley and potentially even Jacob Wismer, that was listed here previously, would be highly concerning. I can't even imagine the logistics on Laidlaw as you bus students from Rock Creek and Springville into Stoller, and then you bus students from the community around Stoller to a different school. I can't imagine what 8 o'clock looks like.
You're all taking time away from Mr. Rancoop, so please.
So, and also with respect to SUMA, much of the SUMA community at Solar comes from the local walkable community. So taking SUMA away, again, you increase the congestion. You increase the congestion in the area, and you don't really solve the problem. So I ask you guys to optimize around theme 2. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Lambert, and then Karen Patel is on deck.
I represent Oak Hills, Meadow Park, and Sunset High School. 2 years ago, our elementary school was split between 2 high schools, which means my children go to school for 8 years with friends, and then they split into a high school. We represent the little green thumb above 26 with the big blue line going down the middle. So basically, we go to Sunset High School with all the other people that have been together for 8 years, and my children basically go to a high school where they know hardly anyone. And so we've gone to elementary and middle school with these friendships, and we get to a high school where we are basically, we've lived in the same place, but it's like we've just moved here, and we're just going for the first time. It has been a really, really tough experience. I hear lots of arguments about walkability and busing. Let's talk about the heart for a minute, because I've been dealing with a lot of pain with my children for the past couple years going to a school where they hardly know anyone. So what I would like to see is that Oak Hills is united once again and going to one middle school and onto a high school together. Or if Stoller is going to be a split feeder between 2 high schools, Westview and Sunset, let us go to Stoller so that we can find some friends in middle school so that we don't come to high school and sit alone because we don't know anybody else. So let Oak Hills go to either a school, again, where they can make friends in middle school so that they don't go to high school completely on their own. Let us go to Timberland. If you're going to send us to Timberland, at least we get to have 3 years where we get to know kids that are going to be going to Sunset. If you keep us at Meadow Park, you're basically giving a small, teeny percentage where kids go to high school knowing less than maybe 10 kids. That is not a good situation. But thank you for your work, and I appreciate your consideration.
All right, hang on a second, Mr. Patel, and on deck is Delaport? Delaport, sorry. I said Kiran Patel. Hiren at yahoo.com. So, no, I didn't give it all out. I gave most of it out.
His address, too.
Yeah, and your address. Sorry.
No, it's a phone number is there.
Yeah, okay. For those people who are interested in stealing Mr. Patel's identity,
So thank you everyone for providing the opportunity to talk to here in the committee. And I'm representing Finley. I live in near to a Finley school. My kids walk to the Finley school, and my neighborhood kids also walk to a Finley school. The major problem what I see in Stoller, we have recently developed last year West Side Linear Park Trail, which is a walking distance bring to a Stoller to about 0.7 miles. But the trail map is not updated in the school district, so it is still like about 1.3 miles and getting a school on Stoller Middle School. So that West Side Trail $4 million investment is not utilized right now for kids, because kids already going to a walking distance to a Finley, definitely they want to go to a walking distance to a Stoller. And I am seeing a 2 of the map. Our community has only 9 students, and hauling from a walking distance to a 4 mile to a different school, Timberland school. That doesn't make sense for kids, because I personally drive, and I don't like to drive in peak hours for 3 to 4 miles. So I don't expect my kids to go the same way, who are in the walking distance to a Finley area, go to a 4 miles to a Timberland because of somebody wants to go to a near to a coming to a store. That doesn't make sense. and that is actually increasing the pollution, transportation cost, and everything into a school district. So walking distance students should not go to a Timberland. That is the first part. The second part is Springville is a optional middle school. For 5 years back, I was also under the debate that when Springville bring to a Stoller Middle School, I recommended that why you don't make it Springville Middle School as a permanent middle school, because there is 4,000 homes coming there, and I don't know how many is developed. That should be a utilized school as a resources there instead of holding all the students there. But definitely Springville can go to a 5 Oaks might be a better option because they are already on a bus instead of walking distance students go to Timberland.
All right, I'm just going to say, Liz, you're up. Mr. Sentinel is on deck.
Thank you, and thank you guys for your time. Thank you for being here. I'm from Raleigh Hills, and we just wanted to talk about, actually, in all 4 of the map options, Raleigh Hills continues to feed into Whitford. But what I wanted to bring up is that Raleigh Hills and Raleigh Park have traditionally been a very close community where we have a lot of kids that are friends, that share sports teams, that right now have the opportunity to go to school together for a long period of time. In map 1 or P1, Raleigh Park is with those other 4 schools, staying together, going to Whitford, but in the other 3 options, Raleigh Park is removed from those. There's no other changes to the schools feeding into Whitford. So I guess if P1 is an option, that would be the preference of the community. Again, we're not asking any other schools to be taken away from Whitford because Raleigh Hills, Boast, McKay, and Montclair, in all 4 of your options, feed into Whitford. So Raleigh Park seems to be the only variable there. And again, the goal would be to keep communities together. It's also a shorter commute for the folks coming from Raleigh Park to get down to Whitford. It's a quick drive down to Shrewsbury. Yeah, we would love to preserve that community and keep those kids together. That's all.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Eric Simentel, and then Ms. Powers, you're on deck.
I'm here to represent Rock Creek. The primary objective is to bring Stoller enrollment to 90% of its capacity. Since Timberland has solved BSD's overpopulation problem, we need to ensure that every middle school is near capacity without deviating by more than 10%. The maps we created here are a failure. All 4 results resulted in Stoller or 5 Oaks being overpopulated to between 134 and 167%. Timberland was created to alleviate overpopulation and is between 61 and 70% capacity on all 4 maps, which all show multiple schools under 70% capacity. To alleviate overpopulation from Stoller, we need to move schools from Stoller to Timberland, starting with Summa. Because of Timberland's proximity to Sunset and with a focus on feeder patterns, we need to identify Sunset feeding elementary schools from neighboring middle schools that are relatively close to Timberland. To reduce Stoller's population, we must start with easternmost Stoller students who zone to Sunset. These maps do not move an entire elementary school from Stoller to Timberland despite our objective. Instead, these maps call for Springville and Rock Creek to have an unreasonable commute through heavy traffic, while Finley is closer to every alternative than Springville and has an alternate middle school with a shorter commute than either Rock Creek or Springville when considering traffic. 3 of these maps are sending the most socioeconomically and racially diverse populations away from Stoller to a disadvantaged school, resulting in a privileged Stoller, while 5 Oaks absorbs the schools with the highest percentages of children with discounted free lunches. If northern schools are moved to 5 Oaks despite traffic concerns, its composition must change by pulling other Westview feeding populations in to balance the socioeconomic diversity and to challenge Stoller academically. Our challenge as a community is the same as this committee, which does not represent all the elementary schools impacted by rezoning. We need to put the good of the entire community ahead of the good of just our own children. We need to step back and accept that these maps are a failure and to start a new process that considers data over the loudest voices in the room.
Okay.
I'm from Sato. I hate public speaking and I'm short, so I'll just read quickly. The main priorities here are to fill Timberland and decrease Stoller overcrowding. So it seems obvious to me that at least one school from the current Stoller boundary should therefore be moved to Timberland, and Finley is the closest and most logical choice. I've worked on 2 main modifications that move Finley to Timberland, thus allowing Springville to remain at Stoller and relieving Five Oaks. There is no way to keep Five Oaks below capacity except to keep Springville at Stoller. It is possible to bring Stoller to reasonable capacity with Springville as long as Finley is sent to Timberland and Suma is moved there as well, or to Meadow Park. I have copies of these maps if you are interested. Yes, you would lose the walkability of Finley to Stoller, but you would gain more equity and diversity in the schools north of 26, plus continuity of friendships and community with more consistent feeder alignment, especially if you made a minor high school adjustment to make all of Oak Hills feed Sunset and all of Jacob Wismer feed Westview. I also wanted to point out that the 90% capacity of Stoller should be based on 2021 numbers, not the 2025 numbers on the map, because it is impossible for Stoller to stay at 90% capacity for 5 years with the growth in North Bethany. When it comes to feeder systems, I believe it's most important to keep middle to high school intact. Middle school is when kids find their true interests and their crowd, and they need those groups to remain stable as they move on to high school. I'm the mom of a current 5th grader, and he's already expecting that most of his friends will end up at different schools because of the middle school options. Even if he goes to Stoller, the chances of ending up in the same hallway are slim to none. Elementary school friendships are great, but they split and part ways when they move on to middle school. So I please ask you to focus on middle school to high school when you're looking at feeder systems, and not elementary.
Okay. So our last speaker here is John Root.
Hi everyone, thank you for letting me have a speak. We are living in the West TT area. We are not either in the Springville or in the Finley area. I see this map purely from the transportation point of view. I prefer the number 3. West TV should go to Timberland. The reason, let's look at the maps. The US 26 is a very busy highway. There's a whole bunch of traffic in Syracuse entry and also in the 217 entry. It's getting worse and worse over the years. So if West TV can go to Timberland, they can greatly relieve the transportation problem. So let's look at the other maps. Map 1, Sim 1. You have Oak Hill and some other some place in a very narrow bottleneck to the green and the southern green area. Not good. Map 4, same thing. There's a very narrow bottleneck of Oak Hills in the Oak Hill community to the southern area. Not good. So let's look at map 2. Map 2, you have the Oak Hills having a very long distance traveling to Timberland. Not good either. So the only option is map 3. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that is our time for public testimony. What I would ask you to do is bear with me for just a moment while I get us back to where we need to be. Okay, so to call out on just a few logistics here, our next meeting is scheduled for January 16th over at Highland Park. But there's one other thing that I wanted to share with the committee and the audience. Excuse me, folks, if you're going to be leaving, please, quietly. We're still conducting the meeting here. In terms of item number 5 on your agenda, there's a message, in terms of getting more messaging to the southern part of the district to solicit more feedback and participation. I am going to be attending 6 different PTO meetings in January for the schools in that area. We have had messages go out from all of the principals, elementary school principals and middle school principals south of Highway 26 to their parents, both in English and in Spanish, trying to generate more interest. I think the comments that you all have been sharing are bearing out in terms of my conversation so far with some people in the south end of the district, particularly the PTO people, is that they're not seeing any changes to the map, so they don't think, hey, why do I don't have a dog in the fight, what's going on? What I've been trying to explain is, look, we have split feeders. We're hearing from some people about splits in elementary school. There's about 7,000 homes coming for the South Cougar Mountain area. Depending on what the committee does for north of 26, there may be cascading effects that come south of 26. So starting to get a little traction, but when I go to the PTO meetings, I'm hopeful to at least confront folks with possibilities. So that's it for that item. And before I go to final questions and direction from the committee, is because we canceled the meeting on December 5th, we were short one meeting. And I think we've had a lot of good conversation here, but I think there's still potentially the need for more time with the committee to move through different subject matters. So we have, I believe it's 2 meetings in January. Let me go back up here. So January 16th and January 30th. I would like to see if the committee is willing to add 1 or even 2 meetings to January. I would say we would do them on the Thursdays like we have been. I need to temper expectations that we are not able to produce data like that. So as we develop it, we will present it to you, but because you talked about it on Thursday the 9th, does not mean you will necessarily get it on Thursday the 16th. We'll do the best we can, but in terms of being able to provide you with a week ahead of time to kind of review materials, that's going to be sacrificed to, we'll get it to you as quickly as we can, but it may not be a full week. Divya?
I will be out of country between January 17th to February 12th, so if you were to add another meeting, I would be open to meeting on January 9th. Also, I can attend meetings otherwise remotely, but it's going to be not connected to each other.
And not to think of the time difference as well. So, Therese?
I'm certainly open to having another meeting in January. I think what would be helpful for me moving forward is for us to have, in light of that data issue, more of a philosophical conversation at our next meeting to really understand whether that's taking it in small groups and then going into a large group, what our priorities are for those next level steps, so that when we do get that data, we know what we're looking for as a group.
I think she captured it great. I would appreciate it. But to add on to that, I think both John and Jason have mentioned what we should do is, since data is going to take some time to produce from your team, maybe the Jan 9th meeting we can do subgroups and whiteboarding, where we are just brainstorming through what exactly are the priorities, what do we want in terms towards meeting the goals. And then you can take that time to produce all that in Jan 16 and give us time to absorb that.
So I appreciate the suggestion and understanding. I think based on the interest that we're seeing here in the room, breaking into small groups to do kind of a workshop exercise for yourself, we don't have the benefit of being able to put you on the record, so to speak, in a small format. So let us noodle on how to best be able to be responsive to what you're saying, but also be transparent that, you know, what's going on is observable and, you know, understandable to our audience, whether that's they're here or on the video. So, go.
Well, I think I have the same sentiment. I think our meeting today was more just ping-pong ideas back and forth. I think the conversation was not being driven in a way that we could get to the objectives. So I was also thinking along those lines that probably starting out the meeting with a philosophical debate of what do we think is important, and breaking up along those lines and coming up with basically our own themes based on those things that we find common amongst us. Hopefully we can have a more fruitful discussion, then we can reassemble towards the end and pretty much present our ideas to the public.
And I think, Jason, you'll wrap us up here.
I'm also fine with having the meeting. Since you mentioned the potential glitch around, if we were to add two, we might maybe not add two in January, but maybe one in January, one in February, so we don't pile up the requests.
That's fine. I'm more than happy to be available. So I'm sensing a general consensus on January 9. I'm seeing nodding. Okay, we will add another meeting for January 9. We'll find a location for it. We were supposed to be at Mountain View today, so in all likelihood on January 9, we will be over at the Mountain View Middle School. Our principal is nodding, so she knows the calendar, knows it. So anyway, we will make sure that the Mountain View is available on January 9. And with that, we are adjourned.